Good evening and a very warm welcome to all of you who have joined this Facebook Live session hosted by Bangalore Science Collective. We all wonder as to when social distancing and face masks will become passe, which brings up a lot of questions on COVID-19 vaccine. Today we have with us Dr. KP Aravindan, who's going to talk on this topic about COVID-19 vaccine development and the progress so far. Dr. Aravindan is currently serving as Medical Director at Microhealth Laboratories, Kozhikode. He was Professor and Head, Department of Pathology at Government Medical College, Kozhikode. On behalf of Bangalore Science Collective, I extend very warm welcome to Dr. KP Aravindan. Welcome, sir, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bindu. As you very rightly said, the whole world is actually waiting for a vaccine, in a sense that how are we going to resume our normal lives? And for a whole lot of people, I wouldn't say everyone, I will come to that later. For a whole lot of people, vaccine is the only hope for the world to go back to its usual routine. So I will briefly talking about the vaccinology, or what the basic principles underlying vaccine and how they are all being applied in the case of COVID. Not merely applied, they are being applied so fast, and things are moving in such a breakneck speed that this is something totally new, entirely new experience as far as we are concerned. So, and I will very briefly touch upon the current vaccines that look promising, and finally, what are the challenges ahead for the scientists, administrators, and for us as a society for this vaccines to become a reality and to really become very effective. This is my whole plan of the talk. And initially, for a long time, people have known that if you get an infection, say chicken pox or measles, then it won't, the second time, you won't get it a second time. It's a once in a lifetime infection. So this has been a knowledge for a long time that many infections, if you get once, you will not get it later. It was only but based on this information, it was only in the late 18th century, 1790s to be exact, that Edward Jenner, for the first time, developed an effective vaccine. In fact, the story is that Jenner was told by the milkmaids the cow hands who never used to get smallpox. And he asked, why you don't get smallpox? They said that, of course, if we get cowpox, then we won't get smallpox. So it was not merely the same infection, but related infections. In case of smallpox, cowpox is a related infection. So anybody who had the infection of cowpox wouldn't later get smallpox. This is what gave him the idea to use the cowpox material as a vaccination, and this was the first effective and successful vaccination. How it occurs, why it occurred, all this were not known at that time. And it is later, in the next 2 centuries, that we have come to understand why reinfections do not occur, what is immunity, and the whole science of immunology has been built up on starting from this initial knowledge to very minute working of the immune system at very molecular level is the current state of knowledge. And it would not be incorrect to say that this entire gamut of knowledge is being applied in the case of COVID-19 to develop a vaccine. Not a vaccine, huge number of vaccines are being developed simultaneously all over the world. So I will just go to a screen share to just look at the basics of our immunology. Of course, why we need to immunize is the first question that we, in case of COVID-19. Why is it that we need to immunize? You know that the problem with this particular disease, in the case of COVID-19, this is caused by a virus called SARS-CoV-2. And this virus per se, it does not cause a very serious infection in most people. It is only a small proportion of people that it becomes very infective. But the problem with this virus is that it can spread silently and very fast within a community so as to infect a very large number of people almost at the same time. And this means that, and of these people who are infected, a small proportion, it may be less than 1%, may develop very severe disease, and of these, a few may die. Those who would not have died otherwise would die. So excess number of deaths can occur. And because of the huge numbers of people who are being affected, huge numbers of people may also die as a consequence. This is what we saw in various countries, starting from Italy to United States and many parts of India. This is what we saw. So one of the main problems is that simultaneously large numbers of people are infected and we don't have the medical facilities to deal with so many sick people at the same time. So what we would want to do is to either slow down the infection rate to a small number, or better still, to prevent anybody getting infected. Of course, if all the people get infected, or 60 to 70% of the people get infected, then something called herd immunity occurs, so that the virus finds it difficult to jump from one person to another, because when it tries to jump, that person may be immune because he or she has had an infection. So this is herd immunity. With vaccination, what we are trying to do is artificially produce this herd immunity without large numbers of people getting infected in natural course, and as a consequence developing serious disease and complications. So we develop herd immunity which does not have the complications of the disease, and simultaneously they will also be acquiring immunity. As it is shown in this particular picture, you can see that here the red ones are the contagious people, surrounded by all susceptible people, so it can very rapidly spread into the population. But suppose a lot of people are immunized, like here all the yellows are immunized people, then from this contagious person to go into a susceptible person would be difficult, because they would be surrounded by people, many people who are immunized. And so if we can manage to immunize at least 60 or 70 or 80% of the population, then we can be sure that this virus has no longer any ways of spreading further, and it will eventually die out from the population. So this is the fundamental principles of vaccination in a population in order to prevent an infection. Now, in case of a microorganism, it can be a bacteria, virus, or whatever. If an organism infects a person, usually what happens is that it will replicate within that person, and when it replicates to such an extent, it may produce symptoms, and the person develops a disease. Now, at the same time, as soon as this infection occurs, another thing that also is started is the immunological responses. And I won't go into the details of it. There are two types of response. One is called the early response, which is called the innate response. But here what we are more interested is in a specific kind of response. And the specific kind of response is very specifically to that particular microorganism or its parts. The immune system will react against various parts or different proteins of that organism. It may be a surface protein, various kinds of proteins. And two kinds of immunological, we call it two arms of immunity. One is a cell-mediated immunity, and the other is called the humoral immunity. It is mediated by two types of cells. The cells are called lymphocytes, and these are called T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes. And long and short of it is that the cell-mediated immune response produces many T cells which are capable of actually killing off the cells containing a virus or other organism. So this is effector T cells. Various types of effector T cells are there. So you have what are known as the cell-mediated response, mediated by these effector killer cells, they are sometimes called. So this kind of killer cells are produced. Then you have the B response, where B response actually also needs help from T, and this B cells proliferate and they become sort of factories which produce molecules called antibodies. These factories are called plasma cells, and these plasma cells will then produce antibodies. And when large titer of antibodies are present in the body, it can again react against this microorganism and clear it off. So that then this person will recover from the illness. So after recovery, subsequently, next time, this same organism is coming into this person, the person already has these T effector cells and antibodies, or more accurate to say that they can produce these in large numbers at very short notice, because it has already got the potential to produce all this. So it already has this immune cells and antibodies which can very easily clear off this organism. This is what happens in the natural infection. This is how a second infection does not, by the same organism, a second infection does not occur. In many cases, there are of course many diseases, organisms which can produce second illness also, because by the time they, like flu for example, the second time it comes, it has changed already. The proteins have changed, so that this immune system can no longer recognize the new change which has occurred in that organism. Okay, so this is what normal immunity is all about. Now, in case of vaccines, what we are doing is we are artificially producing the state of immunity of these T cells and these antibodies. We are producing by using vaccines. And what are these vaccines? The vaccines can be simply a killed organism which has been inactivated or killed completely, and it can then injected into the body. Or it can be part of the organism. Certain proteins only are removed, so that obviously it cannot produce the disease because it is only part, and this part or subunits of these organisms are purified and then injected. Or it can be the whole organism but inactivated. You remove all those portions which actually produce the disease and you inactivate, so that it will behave like an infectious organism, but all the things that it is needed to produce the disease is missing. So whole inactivated organisms can be used as vaccines, or you can sometimes engineer the subunits into another, let's say virus or vector. Most often used is the viruses. You can put this inside this and then inject this person. All this will produce the immune state so that further infection can be prevented. So this is the basics of immunology on which we rely in order to actually make an effective vaccines. So what are the kind of vaccines that are available now? As I have mentioned, you have the inactivated virus. In case of COVID, I'm talking about COVID now. Inactivated virus may be used as a vaccine. You can use live attenuated weakened virus or live attenuated virus. Then the proteins, you can take off portions of the proteins and use it as a vaccine. You can use a viral RNA, viral vector. You take another virus like an adenovirus and the gene from the COVID virus you put into this viral vector so that this virus will go and infect, and this protein whose gene you have inserted will be produced, and antibodies and T-cell immunity will be raised against those proteins that you are introducing in that fashion. Two other types of vaccines that have not been marketed so far are now being tried out in case of COVID-19. One is the RNA vaccine, because this is an RNA virus. This RNA vaccine, we call it mRNA vaccine. mRNA is something that can directly translate or make protein copies. So mRNA is just a message. From that message, the viral protein is made. So you're taking the viral mRNA representing a protein. Like, for example, COVID has a protein known as a spike protein. In case of coronavirus, all these sticking out things, these are the spike proteins. So the gene for the spike protein is used to, it is put in small particles, lipid nanoparticles, and then injected. So that this RNA will get into cells or taken up by cells. They will produce, they'll be translated into the spike proteins, and the spike protein, the antibodies against spike proteins will be produced, and you get immunity. DNA vaccine is similar in principle. The DNA copy of RNA is actually put into another vector and injected. So DNA will first have to be converted to mRNA and then forth into protein, and this protein will evoke a immune response. So there are multiple different types of vaccines that are being tried out now. Now, right at this moment of time, you have about 190 plus vaccines which are being tested in animals and laboratory experiments. About preclinical stage, some 190 vaccines are there. Various phases of vaccine I will go into later. There are 15 vaccines in phase 1, 15 vaccines in phase 2, and at least 10 vaccines which are in the last stage of development. So far none have been approved, but within this year itself, it is expected that one or two will, at least one or two will get approval. Now, just to consider this fact that how long it has taken to develop many vaccines. You know that polio vaccine, the very development 1948 to 55, took about 7 years for Jonathan Salt to develop the first polio vaccine. Measles vaccine development took nearly 9 years. Chickenpox took a long time. Mumps took 4 years. Human papilloma virus, one of the latest vaccines, took about 15 years to develop. And in case of corona, this whole thing has been shortened into a very, very short period of about a year from the start of the infection to vaccine development. The whole thing has been compressed. On the one hand, it is definitely an achievement, a big achievement of science and international cooperation in science, I would say. Another thing is the urgency that the world has now to develop a vaccine most expeditiously. When we talk of clinical trials, there are different phases of what we have seen compressed in about 1 year actually is a very long process. And this process actually starts, I would say it starts with science. It starts with hard science. The science of the organism, what that organism is, what are the different parts of organ. I'm talking about modern vaccine development. It starts with the hard science of the entire knowledge about that organism, its proteins, its sequences and coding sequences and so on and so on. In this case, this whole thing was so fast that within a few months itself, starting from the first infection in Wuhan. The first infection in Wuhan occurred in December 2019, and within a few weeks, the genetic sequence of this organism was identified. The whole genome having 29,900 base pairs of RNA. This information was available within weeks to the whole world. And different parts of the world, using this information, they went on to the next step of identifying the proteins. And the next step of identification of the proteins, again, there was a lot of international cooperation and using multiple technologies. The three-dimensional structures of many of these proteins were available. And this kind of information regarding the sequence and the proteins, etc., helped on the one hand to develop diagnostic tests like the PCR and other kinds of diagnostic tests, and on the other hand to try to develop drugs and vaccines. So any type of clinical trial initially starts with preclinical ways of like, for example, if you're going for a protein vaccine, what are the proteins and how it is preserved and how it can be used and so on. And then you come to actual animal studies are used to find which are the proteins that best evoke an immune response. So every protein may not evoke a good response. So which are the proteins that evoke a good response? First, of course, these are studied in animals. Then sometimes some proteins may not evoke a response unless some additional material is added, what we call as adjuvant. So what adjuvants are best used to evoke this immune response? And such kind of studies are the preclinical phase of the studies. Then you go to the next phase known as the phase 1, where you have the main aim of a phase 1 study is to, on the one hand, to see whether there are any side effects or serious complications, etc., which can occur. And phase 2 is again an extension of the phase 1. In addition to that, you start looking at the efficacy, like antibody production and other things, the preliminary efficacy, like whether antibodies are produced and so on. So phase 1 and phase 2 are with limited number of people, and it is done in healthy volunteers. Healthy volunteers are the ones who participate in phase 1 and phase 2 studies, and if anything happens to them, it is taken very seriously and noted, and so that is the reason why 2 of the major studies had to stop for a short period because a healthy volunteer developed some other illness. So they were not sure whether it was due to the virus or because of something else. So they stopped the entire study for that period, and only after they were sure that it was not due to the virus, then they proceeded further. Phase 3, on the other hand, is a study. It's a real efficacy study which is done in larger number of people, and large number of people are given the vaccine, and they are compared to another group which is not given the vaccine, who are otherwise comparable. This is known as a control group. So you have a test group and a control group, and you see whether how many people develop disease in the test group, how many develop within the control group, and then you look at the efficacy. So the number of people in whom the disease is prevented in the test group must be considerably higher than the those in the control group. That is a phase 3 study. And after this, these things are reviewed to confirm the safety and efficacy, and then given permission to go ahead, and then it is used in the population. And even in the initial days of its use in the population, people are still followed up, and that is known as the phase 4 study, where it is confirmed that it is indeed effective. Any further complications are there or not is also examined. All these are done in a follow-up phase 4 kind of study. So this is the general things that go on. Now, regarding the COVID vaccine, we know that preclinical, there are lots of vaccines. This is a breakup of different types of vaccines, So this is the preclinical. And phase 3 trial, if you look at the phase 3 trial, there are virus, the entire virus vaccines, there are 3 in phase 3. There is the nucleic acid vaccine, actually RNA vaccines, mRNA vaccines, there are 2 major trials. Then the protein subunit vaccines, there is 1. So these, on the whole, about 10 vaccines are in the phase 3 phase. Just to mention just a few of these vaccines, I'll just mention. One is the, I don't think you can see this properly. mRNA vaccines, there are 2 of them which are in the phase 3. One is the Pfizer, it's known as the Pfizer vaccine, that is one, and the Moderna vaccine. Both of these are developed in the US, and there are 2 mRNA vaccines which are in front runners. Now the problem with mRNA is a very, very effective kind of vaccine, and it has a lot of advantages that regarding its effectiveness. But one of the potential problems with this mRNA vaccine is that mRNA has to be stored at very, very cold temperatures. More than the usual, the Pfizer vaccine has to be stored in what is called the ultra cold conditions. So Moderna, it is said that it doesn't need that much of temperature is not needed, but both these actually, when compared to the normal protein vaccines, for example, it is you need to have this cold chain facilities throughout the line, and the entire chain of ultra cold facilities for storage has to be there, which is not there in most countries, because the mRNA, there is no mRNA vaccine now currently being marketed or used. So this is something entirely new for us. So all the things that are required for this vaccines, how much time will it take to set up, is a big question regarding this vaccine. Otherwise, they have been proved to, both these have been proved to be quite effective in the initial studies. DNA vaccines, of course, there are none which are in the particular clinical trial phase. They are still in the preclinical phase. And one thing to note is that one of the Indian companies is producing a DNA vaccine, or at least they are in the clinical trial phase 1 for the DNA vaccine. Now coming to the viral vector vaccines, using adenovirus as a vector, there are 2 which are in the last stage. One is the University of Oxford and AstraZeneca company tying up together. They also have a tie-up with Serum Institute in India to develop an adenovirus vaccine vector. Another is the Russian vaccine, again what is known as a Sputnik 5, produced by the Gamaleya Research Institute. It is also in the final stage, and there is again a tie-up with one of the Indian companies, Dr. Reddy's laboratory. That's also an adenovirus vector vaccine. One difference between the two is that one is a human adenovirus vector. The problem that can arise with human adenovirus vector is that some people may have immunity to this adenovirus vector, and so this adenovirus vector containing the vaccine may be destroyed in the body quickly. Oxford vaccine is producing a chimpanzee adenovirus. It's using a chimpanzee adenovirus vector. So human beings are not expected to have that kind of immunity against a chimpanzee adenovirus, and so it is hoped that that kind of destructive response will not be there, and that is the hope regarding this vaccine. Again, regarding these vaccines, it is much easier compared to the mRNA vaccine to maintain and transport and all that, and so it indeed looks promising for mass production, particularly because these two vaccines have tie-ups with Indian companies which are capable of mass producing vaccines. Okay, protein subunit vaccines, again there are many. So all these vaccines, Chinese companies have also staked. They are producing mRNA, protein subunit as well as viral vector vaccines. But we don't know more details regarding them, but we can expect Chinese companies also to come up with these vaccines. So I will stop the screen share at this point. So now we've talked about the different types of vaccines and the stage of development and the current status regarding the different types of vaccines. Now, one point to remember is that availability of a vaccine does not ensure eradication of the disease from the society. Please remember that smallpox vaccine, Jenner brought the smallpox vaccine in 1796. It was only in 1978, nearly 200 years later, that world was declared smallpox free. It is not that we did not have it's a highly effective vaccine, 100% efficacy. You know, the smallpox vaccine is a highly effective vaccine, and smallpox is a virus which does not mutate. We had all the advantages, and still it took that much time. So there are many other things to look at. Of course, things have improved much beyond that. So what are the challenges before us before we can really get rid of COVID-19 once and for all using a vaccine? I would say, first and foremost, number one would be people's attitudes. In case of smallpox, what really happened was that it was known to be efficacious, but there was all kinds of opposition all over the world, and there are really books written about this, you know, about how there were the opposition regarding smallpox vaccination, and how sometimes it was political, sometimes it was other kinds of social, religious, all kinds of things can happen. Now we would, of course, we would think that we are in 2020. So with science so much advanced, so does all this exist now? All of us know that it does, because we almost the same kind of arguments that was raised against smallpox in the 19th century in Europe and USA and various other states. These are all to be seen in various forms all over the world. You only have to look at the internet and search for immunization or vaccination. You will be surprised that the number of articles opposing vaccination would be almost as much as the numbers which support vaccination. giving all kinds of conspiracy theories and all kinds of theories. So it is indeed important. Of course, COVID-19 has produced a large attitudinal change in people. I don't deny that, which is a good thing. I would say one of the good things that has happened with Corona is that people are starting to respect science, and more people are coming to believe that only science can deliver. So the acceptability of science has really gone up. The acceptability of vaccination in United States, some studies have come, the acceptability has gone up. Already 58% of people are already willing to accept it. This is a country where only about 58% believes that evolution has indeed occurred. So that way, in many places, this acceptability is increasing, but that is not enough. A large, proper campaign explaining the how it works and how it is not harmful. All these have to be really explained to the people, and governments should take the lead. Governments and organizations, voluntary organizations and organized science organizations like yours are the ones who should take this to the people. And I think this is extremely important. Otherwise, we will find that some unfortunate incident occurring somewhere or the other may be blown out of all proportions by the some interested groups of people, by the media, and it may stop the progress of proper vaccination. So people's attitude, people have to be prepared for accepting vaccination. Then there are the logistical issues, which are huge actually. It is not simple. There are huge logistical issues because you want to deliver these vaccines to a huge number of people within a very short period. Generally, what is our immunization schedule? It's all for the people, small kids, for those who are below 1 year. It's the infants whom you vaccinate generally, or small children to limited extent. This is our vaccination schedule, very small numbers. Except in the time of smallpox, we never had this kind of huge numbers to be vaccinated ever. And now, this is a big issue. So, we need to produce that many vaccines. Already what is happening is that all the things are being bought up, that there is a shortage for virtually everything. In the United States, in Europe, everywhere, there is shortage for big steel cylinders, the coating that is used for the cylinders. There's a shortage for all kinds of syringes, and everything is in short supply because of the huge demand. So, the production and the delivery systems, the cold chain for such large number, how are we going to ensure the cold chain? How are we going to assure the quality? How are we going to check at each step of the cold chain whether the vaccine is really, indeed, it is working or not? So these are very huge things. And provided if you are using mRNA vaccines, for example, all these problems are multiplied, and you have even bigger problems in case of vaccines like mRNA. So these are the big problems that we have. And lastly, but not the least, the cost. How cheap are you going to get these vaccines? If it is not affordable, it cannot be used by large majority of people in the world. If you really want to get rid of the disease, there are two uses of vaccination. Any vaccination, one for personal protection, somebody can go and take a vaccine for protecting yourself. The second and more important use is to get rid of the disease altogether from the community by producing what I mentioned earlier, the herd immunity, by vaccinating very large number of people. So initially in the case of COVID, we will be concentrating on the first priority. What is our first priority? Of course, not any individual who has the money to pay for it, but rather the people who are most likely to be affected, or people who are likely to have major complications. The old people, the people who are having other comorbidities, like those with cancer or other problems, or undergoing treatment, dialysis. All these are people in great need of urgent vaccination. So priority should be the health workers who are constantly exposed to very large doses of the virus. So these are the people who need the vaccines first, and it's the needy people who should get it first, not the people who can just buy it from the market. That is not how it should work. That is the first phase. And second phase, we need to get rid of the virus from the society. Means you have to produce herd immunity. You have to vaccinate everyone, or nearly everyone. For that, you need very large numbers of vaccine doses, very large number of people to administer these vaccine doses, very large cold chains and other facilities. So it is a huge task that is ahead of us, and various governments are actually preparing for this kind of eventuality, which is going to come in the next few, starting from maybe December or so. Initially, small trickles of the first vaccines may come. I would expect by about March, some more to come for the high-risk people and all that. And maybe mid-year, mid of next year, we should go into full gear kind of vaccination by that time. So cost is a very important factor. Will we be able to afford it? Here the most important thing is to consider is the intellectual property right regimes, the IPR regimes, the patent regimes, and how it is going to work. Suppose it is going to work the way that cancer treatments are now available in the world, then it is going to be a disaster, because the usage of a vaccination to get rid of COVID will be a mere dream. Because cancer treatment, there are wonderful drugs now which are available for different types of cancers. And there is what is called the personalized treatments, in fact. Each person, each type of cancer, you deal with specific kind of molecules. But that is a dream actually, as far as majority of people in the world are concerned, because of these patents and very high prices. Very, I would say, unjust. If that is going to repeat itself, then it's going to be a really bad thing. But we have to, at least for now, there is some willingness on the part of everyone to avoid that. And people are now talking about ways in which cost can be reduced. Like, for example, one of the ways that cost can be reduced is by what is called as patent pooling. Large number of people get into a sharing of resources to produce large pools of people having some stake. So everybody will have to pay something into that pool. And of course, the major producers will get most of that. But everybody can share the risk and share the cost also. So individual countries can who get into this patent pools can get vaccines at a lower price. So this some kind of arrangement is urgently needed in order to give vaccines at lower prices. Otherwise, in certain instances, some countries may have to use other measures like compulsory licensing and all. But those things, in case of some of these vaccines, may be difficult, because it will lead to a lot of, because right now, till now, there has been a lot of international cooperation in case of COVID-19. So we wouldn't want to really disrupt that. So there must be amicable kind of arrangements by many nations coming together to provide this low cost. WHO and other organizations are taking a lead in doing this, and with this, let us hope that we will be able to get a workable vaccine or vaccines in the next few months. Very optimistically put, I would say within the next 6 months, we will be able to get this and get rid of COVID-19 once and for all. COVID-19 may not be the last infection for us to counter, because we don't know what the future holds for us in the current globalized world. But this experience of fighting COVID-19 would be very useful for the scientific community and the administrators in future, also for dealing with many of the problems that arise in the future. And the baseline, I would say, is that all this can be built upon only based on the scientific knowledge. And science and scientific knowledge is paramount in the future of human beings, and that is becoming more and more clear as the days go by. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. That was indeed very informative. We have a couple of questions actually in the comment box. If you can go through a few of them, it would be great. Are you able to see the question, sir? Okay, so maybe I can read for you. So one question was like, why COVID numbers are reducing in India? Is it because of underreporting, or have we reached herd immunity?
As per the latest ICMR figures, we are nowhere near herd immunity. So, of course, in city concentrations, where this the disease was most, there has been some increase in the population seroprevalence. The amount of people with antibodies is called seroprevalence, and it has been shown that even with starting from about 20% or so seroprevalence, the COVID graph begins to decline, because it is thought to be because of the peculiar mode of infection. It is that it's a mode called super infection. One person infecting many people, and many people not infecting even one person. So suppose there are 10 people, only 1 or 2 will infect many people. The 7 or 8 will not. So in that kind of a model, then even with about 20% or 30% seroprevalence, it begins to come down. So that is indeed one factor. Maybe that is what we are seeing in many areas. But there are 2 things to be borne in mind. One is that once this is all coming down with all the precautions in place, masking and social distancing and all that. Once that is let down, again there is a spurt. This is what we have seen, it's very starkly seen in USA now. After the elections, in many of the states, the daily figures is now reached something like 200,000 cases per day. This is what we see now in Delhi, another epidemic. In Gujarat, recently some have been reported. So, second wave can occur. Kerala, I think again, we have the local body panchayat elections now. I don't know what the effect is going to. Otherwise, the curve was already beginning to flatten and come down, but I don't know what can happen. So we have to be wary about this second waves of infection. And definitely there has been underreporting. Many parts of rural India, large stretches of rural India, we really do not know what the situation is. Underreporting, there's underreporting of cases, underreporting of deaths, all have been there in India. But despite also, underreporting was there even earlier. So given that level of reporting, the graph is coming down.
So you meant to say that is a good sign, considering.
I think so, but we can't relax. That is the point.
Okay. So one more comment was like, it appears from the data that some places like Bangalore, positive cases have fallen significantly, and Sero survey shows 40 to 50% infections. Will a vaccine be late therefore?
No, vaccine is never late. Vaccine is never late. But 40 to 50% if it is there, maybe in a very localized area it is good. But these are the people who will be traveling and meeting other people. There will be another fresh people, uninfected people coming into that area, isn't it? So 40 to 50% is temporarily good enough for us to really flatten the graph a little bit, but never too late for vaccines.
Okay, right, yeah. So there was
many of these are in small pockets, because like Dharavi in Mumbai, you would find about 50% seroprevalence is there, but many other places it's not the same.
And one more comment says Covaxin can be transported in normal temperatures. I think this part you have mentioned, I think probably.
Covaxin, I believe it is a protein subunit vaccine, so it does not need that kind of precautions as to the other vaccines.
Right, yeah. So there are few more questions, I think. So do the people who were affected with COVID and recovered require a vaccination? This is another question.
Provided they have very high antibody levels, maybe they do not need a vaccination. But I am not really very sure about that, because what is the current recommendation, I am not really very sure. Probably no.
Probably no, okay. Another question is, before pushing vaccine, any test is required, because some body might have already developed antibody.
No, even if the antibodies are there, it doesn't really matter. If somebody has an antibody, it doesn't really matter. And vaccination antibodies are supposed to be more efficacious and powerful, because it has the adjuvants and other things, so that it produces a more stronger immunity, to say. And it's not, there's no danger in it, once you have antibodies, having another vaccine doesn't really.
Okay. So one more question, COVID may persist for a long time like HIV?
No. There's no evidence at all for that.
No evidence.
In fact, there is no evidence that it stays for long indeed. None of the coronavirus.
And maybe I will take one last question, sir. How can we ensure that everyone gets the best vaccine?
It's also a political question, isn't it? It's a very, very political question. So we have to make our rulers and administrators, we have to talk to them and make sure that we really want everyone to get, not just few of them to get.
Sure, yeah. Okay, thank you very much, sir. It was very informative, and thank you for accepting our invitation for this talk. And it was very informative, especially the social challenges and all, which was indeed many of us may not be anticipating, actually. That kind of challenges can arise. And in fact, what you mentioned, like during the smallpox time or any vaccine development, if you if you Google, there will be a lot more opposition than articles opposing the vaccination than the for the vaccinations. Yeah. So these are all very important topics, and thank you for your time, and it was really good. And if yeah, I think no more questions, sir. So thank you very much. We are thank you for your
thank you all.
okay. Yeah, thank you very much.